Hi everyone, welcome to today's Safety and Health webcast, Group Lockout Techniques and Applications, sponsored by Masterlock. My name is Kevin Drulli. I'm an associate editor with Safety and Health magazine, and I will be moderating today's session. Thanks for joining us. In a few minutes, we'll start the presentation, but first I want to go over some preliminary items. The views of today's speaker and organizations are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not mean the Council or magazine endorses those items. At the end of today's webcast, we will conduct a question and answer session. To ask a question, simply type it in the text box in the lower left-hand corner of your screen and click the button for Submit Question. Feel free to ask your question at any time during the presentation. You don't have to wait for the question and answer session to begin. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible, but because of the large number of participants today, we might not get to every question. Any unanswered questions will be forwarded along to today's speaker. For basic troubleshooting information, click the Help button located on your screen. At the end of the webcast, you'll be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey, and I'll let you know more about that after the presentation. This webcast is archived, so you can access it after today's live event. To view it and all of our past webcasts, go to safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Our speaker today will be Todd Grover. Todd brings more than 30 years of experience as a practicing safety professional and EHS manager, and currently serves as Global Senior Manager for Applied Safety Solutions at the Masterlock Company. He also is a participating member of the ANSI Z244.1 Committee on Control of Hazardous Energy, as well as a delegate to the US PC 283 Committee, contributing to the upcoming ISO 45001 Global Standard for Occupational Health and Safety. Again, we thank all of you for tuning in today. Todd, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address people on fundamentals, but challenging fundamentals in group lockout, or a team approach to protecting yourselves as you go out and service and repair and maintain machinery. A lot of the information I'm drawing from today has been very well laid out. Three sources I want to tell you about is, of course, the OSHA regulation 1910-147, and that one is the basis for compliance citations and so on. However, the guidance is not very detailed in 1910-147. It's more of a what you must do rather than good ways to get it accomplished. So OSHA does have another excellent guidance document, and I would highly encourage you to put this into your portfolio of safety information if you don't have it already. It's their guidance to their compliance officers called CPL 02-00147. It is a how-to manual for the field officers to evaluate whether lockout programs are compliant or not, and it is a user-friendly guide to implementation. We and the ANSI committee looked carefully at the group lockout guidance provided in CPL 147 and thought it was so well done that we actually moved it into the ANSI 244 standard that we just released in 2016. So verbatim, the group lockout guidance is also found in that document, and it's the foundation of a lot of the methodology we recommend and see practiced out there on a day-to-day basis. So what is group lockout? It is recognizing that often one person can't complete the job alone. It is getting people synchronized when they are working together so that they are all protected equivalently from the hazards of startup, and that each person is participating personally in preventing an unexpected startup that could injure themselves or allow them to remove their lock and injure others. So it consists of specific work procedures and practices that stop unexpected startup and prevent the person being in the harm's way if there's a sudden release of energy that could be prevented through that careful and deliberate shutdown and control of machinery. It should be performed any time we have 2 or more people working, including specialty crafts, unique departments like, for instance, maintenance and operations teaming up. And it results in a group of procedures or methods that creates that level of protection equivalent to a solo lockout, that one person working on the machine under the protection of their locks and isolated devices has the same means of protection as anybody joining in that would offer them assistance or bring specialty skills to the lockout being performed. Group lockout has some clear expectations, and that is anytime 2 or more workers are involved in a job where they're removing machine guards or defeating safety devices, and that as a result of the work behind those safeguard devices is exposing them to dangers at the point of operation where the action is taking place within the machinery. That also applies anytime workers are putting their bodies into the danger zone or movement path of equipment. Maybe a good example would be entering an interlocked gate and going into a robotic cell. There, both employees or all participating employees need to be able to assure that a mistake in communication, being out of the line of sight, does not allow one of the workers to trigger the machine's activity after their personal lock is removed while people are still in the line of danger. OSHA is pretty clear about calling out the wide range of activities that are to be included in lockout considerations, and the list is provided there. Really, it comes down to when you are exposing yourselves to the hazards and sudden startup could claim a victim. That is when lockout needs to be in place and equivalent protection for everybody participating. Now, it's important to point out that I see that group lockout is often limited to more involved tasks, longer duration tasks where a lot of people are involved. It's important to point out that simple tasks cause an awful lot of injuries. In fact, if we look at accident statistics, unjamming machinery and cleaning machinery together combine to be almost 6 out of 10 lockout accidents. And often it is the person starting the machine and injuring someone else who is in harm's way. And so group lockout has a place not only in the complex tasks, but in the day-to-day things where 2 people or more are teaming up to get the job done. How can we put in efficient and fast methods to isolate that machine and keep it secured till everyone agrees we're done with the job, we're in a safe position for re-energization, and the procedure can be followed. Okay, so one of the foundations of lockout safety is a written energy control program, and I want to draw your attention to just the area in your particular lockout program that talks about group lockout practices. I've seen programs that give it no more than a mention. In group lockout, everybody must lock out accordingly. And I've seen some really good programs that say, these are the type of group lockouts we practice. These are some of the scenarios they may apply to. This is the checklist to follow to make sure we are in compliance with OSHA, we are in sync with our program requirements, and that means everybody is safe. So we emphasize written programs to be a friendly guide, and the difference may be looking at that OSHA regulation, 1910-147, and compare it to that instructional guide for compliance officers. And you can see clearly there's a much better how to approach getting down into the policy details of how things should be done. Some of the things to make sure are in your group lockout program is a aspect of training that teaches group lockout when it's appropriate, what special techniques and equipment should be used. It should get into the responsibilities of anybody participating in group lockout. So you may have multiple levels of authorized personnel. You may have the potential of involving affected personnel who should not be going hands-on or going into danger zones, and clearly laying out in group lockout how they need to be non-involved and leave it to the people permitted to protect themselves with locks. Very important to get across. Group lockout often has some unique equipment aspects, and so pointing out how to access equipment that is going to be necessary, for instance, to do group lockout versus teaming up and going to work on a single energy source type machine. So your employee training program should outline group lockout practices that your facility sees routinely put into use, and perhaps consider a safe work permit program, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. This is for the unusual situations, the more complex work, maybe a sudden job that has no lockout procedure developed for the unique machinery that you're going to be working on. So we'll talk about safe work permits in just a little bit. Now, lockout procedures are a must for group lockout. That may be the idea that it's a single energy source machine, but everybody cleaning it is going to put a lock in the right place. That may be part of training. That may be a standard procedure that is not documented in a machine-specific format, but is clearly trained as a procedure. Anytime you're dealing with complex machinery with more than one energy source or distant power connections or isolation points, or when there's a particular order of needing to shut down the machine as to not trap energy, it's very important to have a documented procedure. It should lay out the basic rules and requirements under the OSHA standard. It should have procedural steps as to how to shut down this equipment. It should indicate how to place lockout equipment and what may be required. And if there isn't an ability to transfer lockout, which is an aspect of group lockout, handing off from one group to another, that should be noted as far as the procedure. And as a best practice, it should include instructions for testing machinery to make sure that there is a fully isolated state before allowing people to go to work on it. This is so important in group lockout because verification should be done by each person participating in the lockout procedure, but often is handled by a representative of the group. That person has got to realize that our verification obligations are very high because with a human error made and lack of verification, that machine possibly could start up and hurt a number of people. So very important to address that. This happens to be a format of a procedure that we put into the ANSI standards, a demonstration of a good visual technique. Very important when you're trying to get multiple people on board at the same time. As far as lockout techniques go, it's important to have this written technique put down on paper because here's a couple of scenarios I've dealt with. A couple of workers come together and they decide, hey, we're going to lock this machine out and go to work. One does it one way, one does it another way. Okay, one way is probably right, one way is probably wrong. Both ways may be wrong. There may be no sense to the order, but why even have the disagreement? Have a detailed lockout procedure for people to work with. Okay. This is going to also account for reliably assuring that residual energy is handled and that we truly get to a zero energy state. So good written procedures literally put everybody on the same page and moving forward. Now, pretty lockout procedures are not always available. They're not always hanging there. Okay, and so what I want to emphasize is that it does not have to be a polished and finished procedure to be legal. But I would emphasize that if you're going into a group lockout situation where there is not a written procedure, having a handwritten type template, a place to note energy sources and the general order being followed and the idea that it was tested to zero energy, those handwritten notes constitute a written hazardous energy control procedure. And so it can exist moments before the actual lockout is put to the test. It does not have to be created far in advance, and this is often the case for machinery that has not been properly assessed. This is often the case for contractors coming into a workplace, needing to protect themselves with lockout as they team up to do work and having no procedures to draw from. So this handwritten, just-in-time approach is crucial because it does show that the group is working off of one defined procedure, and it is something that the group can then effectively verify. So keep that as an option anytime you don't have that written procedure in place. Okay? So safe work permitting systems take a lot of different forms. There are specific lockout permitting systems that are often used in process safety or in utilities, and that is we have never locked out this combination of equipment before, and the risks are high, and so what we're going to do is we're going to follow a safe work permit system that has an overseer that authorizes the work, that lays out the order of lockout that should be applied. It sets up testing and verification requirements. Permits do have a lifespan. They have a specific start date and a duration that they are going to be good for. They are for a specific job, and the permits will name individuals that are allowed to participate in the permit. So that may be a list of names, that may be a designation of certain contract companies that have been brought in to do the work. But those are some of the criteria that are very important to this permit process. Any special precautions that are required have to be clearly indicated. They have to be communicated to workers, often in a tailgate safety briefing or a specific overview by the supervisor before the equipment is locked out. Okay, so the safe work permit sometimes gets a lot of use, but it should be in the back pocket of any safety professional going into an unknown situation, a mixed group of workers between contractors and employees. This is one way to pull everybody together. It can consist of the written procedure being put right into the permit, or it can reference a specific lockout procedure as part of the notation on the permit. Okay? So let's talk over some technique here of group lockout, and we'll start simple and we'll get a little bit more complex. The idea here that you are going to lock out a particular piece of equipment, one lock per person per energy source. That's a great idea. Let's say that I have an electrical and an air source and I'm all set to go, and now I realize, hey, I can't do this by myself, so I'm going to call a friend over, and if my lock went directly into that device and there's only room for one lock, we've got some decisions to make here. And the right decision is, let's take off my lock, let's put a hasp on, let's put my lock back on, and have anybody joining me add their lock into this hasp type operation. Now, a common practice that I've seen many places and like quite a bit is the idea that anytime a person locks out a device, whether it be electrical disconnect or a valve or whatever may be being secured, they start with a hasp, and right off the bat, that provides the space for others to join them if necessary. If it's only them, the hasp was there, it secured the device, the lock was in place, but if somebody has to join, there is no unlocking and relocking. There's only the addition of the new person's lock to the hasp. Okay? So anytime two people work together, It becomes an equal use of locks compared to the use of a lockbox in terms of efficiency, and it is more efficient often because people are going to be adding their locks in a very efficient manner. For instance, if I have 2 people and they're locking out 2 points, I'm going to have 2 locks applied to each of the points. That's 4 locks. If I would use a lockbox in place, I still would lock 2 locks. The 2 keys would go in the lockbox, and each person would attach their personal lock to the lockbox. So I'm still at 4 locks. I'm still in a level of involvement. Anytime you start to get beyond 3 workers, anytime you start to get beyond 3 lockout points, the efficiency of going to a lockbox has got to be considered, as it reduces the number of locks and it's an easier place for people to come and achieve the control as they come and go from the task. Okay. Now, some common problems. When the task is clearly understood to only require 1 person and their locks can be directly attached, something like circuit breakers and certain valves, many times only the lock is directly attached. Many simple jobs often require an extra set of hands, and so this is going to facilitate, by the use of a hasp at all times, the easy coming and going of people. Okay, so many times lockout is a very short-term activity, and we have seen shortcuts taken where time is of the essence. There's no place for a lock. We don't want to remove the lockout, reapply the lockout, retest the machine, and so people then have an excuse to work under the protection of somebody else's lock. Certainly that's not compliant. It's a dangerous practice because sooner or later that lock may be prematurely removed and an unexpected startup claim the unprotected victim. All right, so a solution would be requiring all workers to apply a lock with a hasp that they personally carry with them. The other thing is at frequent or critical lockout points, actually putting a group hasp there by virtue of a tether that keeps the hasp available at all times, easily applies, and allows the locks to be added. Then when the lockout is released, the group hasp remains at the lockout device, ready for the next time group lockout needs to take place. Okay, so there are ways to be efficient in getting equipment out there, in staging people for success, and that is either through personal equipment being added in, such as the hasps, or securing that multi-lockout capability at the machines. So let's talk about group lockbox. The simple methodology is a master lockbox or a type B lockout according to OSHA. Okay? Now, when we've got larger groups of workers with multiple isolation points, group lockout provides a level of protection equal to the worker placing a personal lock at each isolation point. It consists of 2 types of locks. Machine locks control the energy sources at the machinery, and machine locks can be individually keyed. So if I've got 6 locks, each key would be different, and I would be locking 6 keys up in the lockbox. Or machine locks can be key alike. So one lock fits all those locks. There's only 1 key in the lockbox, and when you go to unlock it, it's very clear which 1 key is going to fit all the locks. Okay, so that saves a little bit of time and efficiency. Your personal lock controls the lockbox. So as people come and go from the job, their personal lock goes on, and with that box lock shut, there's no way for others to access the keys, releasing the machine and allowing startup to occur. So we would recommend that you identify a lockout leader to be responsible for locking out the equipment according to the written procedure, and then to add their lock to the lockbox once the keys to the machine locks have been placed inside. Group lockout devices are placed at all energy control points. Secured by the lockout leader, all participating authorized personnel should verify that the proper lockout procedure has been applied and demonstrate that they are in a zero energy condition by testing or observing testing being done of the machine. That is an absolute right. Regardless of the size of the group locking out, the ability to either test for yourself or witness the lockout testing being done is part of the OSHA standard. Okay? It gets more complicated as the lockouts get larger. We'll be talking about that. A group lockbox should only have the locks of the participants on it during the time frame they are exposed to the hazard. So when I begin working on the task, my lock is the first thing that's placed. I go to work. I get my job done. If I know that I'm leaving for the day, if I know that I'm leaving because my work here is done, I will remove my lock at that time so that as the work is fully wrapped up, my locks are not behind when I'm not paying attention to the job anymore. That makes for an emergency removal requirement that can complicate the process as well. So personal locks should be on the box only for the duration of personal exposure. Now, if I'm going to do the job one day, we know it's going to carry overnight, we're going to go right back to it the next day, no problem leaving personal locks on in place. But when that job is done in the responsibility of the person who's placed a lock, their lock should come off that box. Okay. We talked over this verification aspect. It's very important that the participants know that the machine has been properly secured, that it is properly isolated, that energy devices are in place, that stored energy has been addressed and either released or otherwise neutralized. Where electrical contact with live parts potentially could take place, it's important for a qualified person to go in using a meter and verify that a truly de-energized state has taken place. Okay? Once zero energy is verified, tested controls should be returned to the off position so they don't suddenly start up once the lockout has been removed and energy has been restored. Okay? Now, what is the true pace of compliant group activity in your workplace? Question is it frequent enough that group boxes need to be immediately available at the department level? Or is it infrequent enough that a traveling lockbox can be brought out to a big job when the demands of the work require it? If the group lockbox is not present, if that's the method that you're choosing to work with, then it may very well not be used at all. And these are some of the shortcuts we see happen when people are not working completely under their protection of a personal lock applied to the box. For example, I've got a couple of sanitation line leaders lock out each piece of equipment ahead of a cleaning crew. This allows them, the cleaning crews, to lock directly into the box, test the zero, and complete their work in a safe manner. By the time they're finished with the machine they're working on, the next machine has already been secured, the lockbox is ready to go, and they're just moving their task forward. So the lockbox on one machine just completed then moves ahead to the next machine, and it's locked out there. So what we have is kind of a stair-stepping approach where competent people are preparing a lockout. The arriving workers simply have to add their locks in and verify testing is complete, do the work, and in the meantime, the machine next in line is being handled. When they have moved on to that one, the lock moves around, the lockbox moves around them to the next machine, and that way very efficient cleaning and servicing and maintenance can be performed on a series of equipment. Okay. Now, the question is, if the nature of your work shows that group lockout will be a frequent and complex activity with large groups of people or mixed group of workers participating, an organized system of group lockout is a must. without a plan for group lockout, people are going to be left without the ability to participate. People will maybe throw a lock into the mix without knowing really what they're participating. They're calling it good enough simply to have a lock in place. So one way to get ahead on the efficiency curve is to set up a series of locks boxes that can be coordinated, assigned to a job. When a machine needs to be locked out, the lockout leader following the procedure could get their locks in place using gang hasps to do the work. And often in a large and complex lockout, the lockout leader will be the first lock in place, placing their lock on a gang hasp, and they will be followed by a verification leader. You can call it other things. It may be the second lockout leader, maybe the verifier. But that person comes through independently with the procedure, and they look to see the next step I would do is to lock this device out. And indeed, it's been locked out. And when I concur, I'm going to put my verification lock in place and then move down the machine progressively so that each lockout point will have the primary lockout leader's lock on it and the verifier's lock on it. Both those keys to those machine locks will go into the group lockbox. They will be sealed and locked out. Both those people will participate, and at that point, there is verification of testing that the mass of other workers may consider to be adequate. OSHA considers this to be adequate. Evidence of zero energy state, and the work can continue. This is often the case for dozens or even 100 lockout points being applied to a specific process. Now, OSHA has another type of scenario. They call it a satellite lockbox. In this situation, each member of the lockout group should be given an opportunity to make sure the procedure has been correctly applied. But OSHA does allow for representative verification to be accepted by group members, and this can bring the confidence to lock in and lock out of the lockbox knowing that the machine is fully controlled. In a satellite lockbox, the verifier, the primary lockout leader goes through and locks out the machine according to the procedure. A verifier goes through and verifies the lockout according to the procedure. It may be other trade groups want to send representatives through and verify the procedure has been properly applied. When they come to the main lockbox or the master lockbox, the keys of the machine locks of all the primary leader and the verifiers go into the box. The lock is sealed. The lockbox is sealed in by the lockout leader, and each representative group attaches a personal lock to that lockbox. So we may have maintenance mechanics, and we may have electricians, and we may have steam fitters or pipe fitters. We may have the cleaning crew. Every crew is represented, and the leader of that crew attaches a lock to that box. Then they go back to where their group is gathering and preparing for work. At that satellite location, a separate lockbox is kept. That key goes into the satellite lockbox. The box is secured, and the cooperative team effort attaches personal locks to that lockbox, securing the key that represents the trade at the master box so that the master box could not be opened and released. Now when the trade finishes their work for the day, they come back, they remove their personal locks. When the last lock is removed, the lockout leader for that team, that special work group, removes their key from the master box, or the satellite box, I should say. They go back to the master box and they remove their representative team lock off that master box. And when all work crews complete their work, all locks will have been removed from the master box. The lockout leader then removes their lock from the box, and the machine locks The keys of the machine locks can then be released and the machine restored to energy. Anytime a team member at the work group level removes their locks, they cannot touch the main machine anymore. They cannot go into danger zones. And so this is an orderly transfer of responsibility from team representatives down to the team and right back up again, assuring that the machine is locked out before anybody goes to work, and assuring that everybody has completed work and is aware the machine may be ready to be started up. Okay. There's also another technique called a job lock. Okay. So during operations that are conducted over multiple work shifts that could span days or weeks, a job lock system is used to make sure there's continuous lockout protection for employees during shift or personnel changes. Now in this situation, the lockout leader secures the master lockbox with a recognized job lock after all the keys from the lockout devices are inside the box that is securing the machinery. This step is completed before subsequent locks are applied to the group box, meaning that we're getting the participation of workers who are going hands-on. Okay? A job lock can have multiple keys if they are in the sole possession of the various lockout leaders overseeing the lock on each shift. And so what we're saying here is the lockout leader does not know if they will be present when the job is completed. Okay, and so we are following standard master lockbox procedures where the box is secured by personal locks, but the master key securing that can either be transferred or shared among leaders. They are not personally working on the machine because they would have a lock that has a key someone else has access to. But what we're doing is we're maintaining continuity over many work shifts. The lockout leader for the work shift will be able to remove that key, that lock that was applied by another leader, if the work indeed completes at that time. So the keys never lose the ability to be locked, even if all personal locks are off the box. Okay? Now, it is always a good idea to perform a start of shift verification by walking down the machine using the procedure and seeing that indeed everything is still in place, all locks are secured, and that the box is still protected by that particular job lock. But OSHA particularly does allow for a sharing of keys or multiple keys to the same lock under the circumstances that the job lock leader does not physically work on the machine unless their personal lock has also been applied to the lockbox. Okay? So I think that pretty much explained it. I think I got a little ahead of myself as far as the process. When the work is complete and all personal lockout locks are removed from the lockbox, the lockout leader present may use the job lock key to release the machine locks in the box and restore energy to the equipment. Okay. Working with contractors, a big issue. Contractors can be absolutely excellent in lockout and may be able to teach the companies they work for a thing or two about efficient group lockout activities. Contractors may feel that they are not required to lock out. Sometimes they feel the OSHA 1926 construction standards apply to them. They may not fully participate. And so trying to get a level playing field is very important. When a contractor works on a job site where there is a OSHA compliant lockout program in place, they are required to participate. The 1910-147 law applies to contractors based on their location and the situation they're under, not the type of work that they're performing. Okay? So the hosting employer and contractor need to exchange information. How prepared is that contractor to lock out? Are there people trained and equipped to do the job? Which energy control program are we going to follow? And often it is the host site's program that takes precedent over the contractors. If there are any difference between the host site and the contractor's programs, the host site should provide training to align the contractor with the requirements of their program. Often that's provided to a contractor's representative, and then the representative goes back and trains the tradespeople coming in to do the work. A host company also should provide existing lockout procedures to contractors for the equipment they will be working on. Those procedures are the responsibility of the host to provide, and if they are not completed at the time that work is going to begin, either that handwritten agreement in terms of writing a lockout procedure on the spot can be accomplished with both the contractor and the host company walking down the machine and noting what's being done to lock it out. Another aspect to remember is that safe work permit program, where all the data is being recorded on the permit and the contractor is being authorized to participate under that program. The host employer should be sufficiently aware of contractor activities to recognize if the contractor is acting in accordance with the host site program and any training that they have been prepared with. And contractors should be equipped to perform all required lockout procedures. Having those procedures ahead of time assures that they have the ability to get the right equipment in sufficient quantities together so that they can fully participate, either joining in lockouts that have been started by plant personnel or originating lockouts themselves when multiple workers are participating that are employed by the contractor. Okay. Shift or personnel changes. There needs to be continuity when people are coming and going. Okay, and this is to allow the orderly transfer of lockout device protection between ingoing and outgoing personnel. Okay, so knowing that a job is going to bridge multiple work shifts requires communication to take place, and that is either the second shift coming in early or the first shift staying a little bit later, so there's coordination and sign off. The best thing to do is for the first shift people to be able to hand off each lockout isolation point to the incoming crews. Locks and devices are changed together to assure continuity of lockout and to prevent overlooking lockout devices that may have to be removed by emergency procedures if the outgoing workers are unavailable. So if the machine is going to be finished on second shift but it was locked out on first, having that continuity to realize I'm not leaving a lock behind that nobody else knows about is very important. Be sure to notify the affected personnel on the shift that is coming in that a lockout is in place, their job may be affected by it, they need to keep that respective safe distance and not participate in hands-on tasks at the point of operation or in danger zones around that equipment. And it's really important when handing off lockout responsibilities from shift to shift to make sure that retesting takes place on the incoming shift. You would like to have the assurance that the first crew did properly isolate everything and test to zero energy. However, if they didn't, the idea that their locks are in place and you're just hanging your lock and going to work is a false sense of security. The incoming crew should go through and identify that the proper isolations have been made and make their own test and verification to assure that they are indeed taking on a safe working condition. Okay, so very important to take personal responsibility for that testing and verification when you're coming on duty. Okay, emergency removal requirements are a problem when there is not sufficient coordination where somebody has left locks behind who intended to come back the next day and do work, or simply forgot where their locks were placed. Group lockout using a lockbox is one way to circumvent that, because the lockout leader and the experienced people who have placed all the locks, they are able to go back and orderly remove locks. All they have to do from a participation standpoint is assure that each worker has removed their personal lock from the lockbox. However, if it becomes important or necessary to remove a lock or a tag that has been left in place by an employee that is not present to remove their own lock, here is some good guidance to follow. First of all, have a documented emergency removal form, something that can guide you through the orderly process and show that you did your due diligence in making sure this was done properly. Get the person's supervisor involved. A search should be made to make sure that person is not on the premises, not simply because it's after hours, but verification. Did they clock out? Did they indicate that they were leaving? Is their car out of the parking lot? Those kind of physical verifiers are not present. Attempt to contact them at home or by cell phone. And if you can have voice contact to notify them, either come back and remove your lock, or we're going to be removing your lock, that's sufficient. Still part of emergency removal, but at least they were voice contacted and communicated with you. They understand their protective device is no longer present. It is not sufficient to leave a voicemail, to send them an email, to send them a text. And in the case of a text, there's no way to know the text coming back saying, okay, cut it off, wasn't somebody else texting in that the realization really did not take place. So that voice communication at a minimum with the missing worker or the absent worker is very important. Management then authorizes the removal of the lock or tag once notification has or has not been made, and the lock is removed, the energy is restored, the machine is put back into cycling, and the documented removal activity is noted, what was done. It is important to notify that authorized worker before they return back to work. And so often notification is made by posting signage at the machine where locks are removed, by posting notification at the entry point where the worker is expected to come in, by posting notification at a locker or at the time clock, and basically saying, don't go back to work until you've checked with your supervisor, your lock has been removed. As odd as it sounds, there have been a number of fatal and critical accidents that have occurred simply because a person's lock was cut off when they were not aware that it had been done. They did not do their due diligence of checking and verifying zero energy before they started work again, never checked to see that their locks were still in place. They began work and the machine was able to start up and do the damage that it did. So this requirement of OSHA is based in real-world experience of these accidents taking place. Another mention here is to reassure people the value of putting your personal identification on your lock, whether you're stenciling your name on a lock, writing it in a permanent marker, or attaching a tag that identifies you. One of the ways emergency removal becomes very complicated is when we have a lock hanging in place with no idea who placed that. It becomes very hard to provide emergency notification that the lock has been removed. Often, I've seen companies have a stand down and a facility-wide meeting to say, this was a situation, we removed a lock that had no name on it. We're informing everybody in the most responsible way possible this lock has been removed so that you can protect yourself and not go into harm's way because that lock is no longer protecting you. All right. So there's no one-size-fits-all program to group lockout. There's a lot of different ways to come at this. I've seen a lot of creative ideas, especially in permitting and tag-out systems and coordination between contractors and host sites that I think were well represented within this presentation, but it comes down to really evaluating. Group lockout is a micro safety management system. So to wrap up, I'd like to emphasize a plan. Group lockout goes well when you know what you're going to do before you have to do it. You're properly equipped, you're properly trained, and there's basically a procedure to follow. Prepare your workers by doing the job-specific training, backed with doing the lockout procedures that make all the difference if they're followed correctly. Get the lockout equipment in a properly accessible manner so that it's there when they're going to need to use it. If it's not, that's where people do not engage and protect themselves fully. Check. Verify each group lockout by testing for zero energy. Have at least a second set of eyes also verify that the lockout has been done properly. And then have your leadership routinely inspect active group lockout activities to make sure it's on point, it's doing what it should, and to congratulate good practice. And then act. If you do find deficiencies, if you do find errors in communication, lack of participation, don't just chalk it off as, hey, it was a complex job. See what you can do to improve practices and put people in a better frame of mind to know what's expected of them, what they need to do in order to protect themselves, and that it's really a team effort. If we're going to work safely, everybody's got to participate and be part of the group lockout effort. Okay? By working together consistently to get the work done right, on time, and under the protection of well-applied group lockout practices. So with that, I think I've covered the ground pretty darn well. I'd like to open up the forum to questions that may have come in.
All right, Todd. Well, excellent. Great job. We thank you for your insights and expertise. Before we get going to the Q&A, I just want to remind folks of the evaluation survey that we're asking you to complete. The survey should be appearing on your screen here momentarily. Your input is important because it'll help us improve future webcasts. If you're not seeing that survey on your screen, turn off your turn off your pop-up blocker, and you may also access the survey by clicking the survey button on the lower right part of the screen. Again, we'll get into questions in a minute, but one that we did see, someone had asked about CEU credits, but just a reminder that those do not apply to Safety and Health webinars. So now, again, to the questions. The first one, what is meant by single energy source? Is there a requirement for it to be a plug, for instance, or would this single energy source work for an electrical disconnect?
An electrical disconnect is a good example of a single energy source, but there's a caveat. A single energy source, when I turn it off or I break contact with the flow of energy going through it, I'm done. This machine has no more energy within it and it cannot operate. However, in electrical situations, if there is capacitors within the machine that still hold power within them, requiring a period to drain out or to be grounded, or if there are backup systems like batteries that could provide power, then even though one source turned off the power, there are multiple sources of energy that have to be considered. So a single energy source is one isolation point that when I turn it off, I have no residual energy. There's nothing else to do to achieve a safe working state. I apply my lock or locks, and I can go to work. Now, a single energy source machine does not, under OSHA, require a written lockout procedure because of its simplicity. However, it is expected under regulatory compliance and best practices that you do lock out even single energy source machines. All
right, our next question. If my group box has 12 locks needed to isolate a piece of equipment, Is it okay to have the 12 locks keyed alike to simplify? Would you place the master in the box and then each employee places their personal lock on the group box?
That's exactly right. The 12 locks all keyed alike. There would be one key to 12 locks, and they would go on the machine, and then it becomes very easy to pick the one key to release all 12 locks versus 12 keys and then trying to get the order correct to release the locks. Then that one key to those locks, it's not a master key, it is a key-to-like set. That one key goes in the box, and personal locks secure the box, meaning that anyone's lock left behind is sufficient that that box will not open until that last lock is removed and all work is stopped on the machine.
Is it customary to have employees sign in and sign out of a group lock on a form in addition to putting their lock on and taking them off?
That's a really good question. I'm going to answer it two ways. Number one, there's not enough simple group lockout going on where we're simply accounting for each person participating in task, and there's small size tasks that are short duration. Clearly, logging in and logging out would not be part of that type of expectation. However, it is common on complex tasks that we have a record of who's participating at any one time. These tend to be longer duration tasks, taking the better part of a day or longer. They tend to be multiple specialty trades being represented, and so we want to know who from each group is currently participating. And in addition to removing lock off the box, often people will cross their name off the checklist because we may be accounting for dozens of people, and to go through each lock hanging on the box to see a name can be time consuming and error prone. But at the time you hang your lock on the lockbox and you put your name on the list, it's very easy then to account for how many people are left, who do I need to talk to if I need to get locks removed because we're ready to start up.
Under a lockbox system, is a person with a lock on a box required to visually inspect the isolated energy source before work to confirm positive isolation, or just confirm a locked lockbox? They
absolutely should verify that the machine has been fully isolated and verified effective by testing. Okay. Now, the best form that takes, and what OSHA holds to be the right of the authorized worker, is to visually inspect for themselves and test for a zero energy state. In scenarios where there's just a few people participating, the idea that either you physically test or you observe someone else testing so that you achieve a comfort level with the testing, that is the right of each authorized worker. In larger circumstances, let's say that we have 40 workers involved in a project, it would be very hard to walk all 40 through. And so that's where my description of a lockout leader following the procedure, placing the first lock. Independently, a verifier coming through, following the procedure and seeing if they agree or not with the placement of the first lock, of the lock by the first leader, and then verifying by the addition of a second lock. That's a demonstration of a responsible system where what I want to know as I'm joining a lockout like this is that there's been primary and secondary verification of effective lockout. And then I make my own decision. Do I trust that? Or do I go check it for myself? But OSHA does understand it is a compliant practice, as long as that testing and verification is done, that each worker does not have to do their own. It is kind of a case-by-case basis, but without that leading effort to test and verify and be able to share that information with each incoming worker, there's no good basis for that worker to decide whether or not they need to personally observe or test the machinery. So long story short, you do not have to personally verify so long as you are aware that a responsible verification effort that you're satisfied with has taken place.
Okay, I believe we have time for one more question. Can the job lock attached by a non-working lockout leader have a universal key that would be available to others on the same shift?
Yes. That job lock key can go to, you just paraphrase that with on the same shift. Typically, no. A job lock key may be in the possession of a recognized leader on each work shift, so that when the work goes from shift to shift, the appropriate holder of the job lock key is going to be present in order to release that final lock on the box. However, any job lock holder wanting to go hands-on or go work on the equipment would have to apply a personal lock to protect themselves. I would say that I have not heard of multiple job lock keys being present on the same shift, because the job lock is usually unique to the lockbox, but it is typically one job lock key per work shift in the hands of the responsible party controlling the overall lockout activity.
Okay. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'm sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions, but again, all of today's unanswered questions will be forwarded on to our speakers. We do hope you take the time to fill out the evaluation survey on your screen to give us your feedback. And that ends today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. We'd like to thank Todd Grover, everyone at Master Lock, and all of you who listened in. Thank you and have a great day.